Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you about 6 key rules if you're new to setting boundaries. So in this video, we're going to cover 6 key rules, some principles, and some things that are really important to know. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to do these things, how to really execute. And keep in mind, if you're listening to this video and you're like, oh my goodness, I want to do a way deeper dive into all of this stuff because I realize this is a huge issue, then you can take a look at our boundaries course. We have a really in-depth boundaries course inside PDS, and I will put a link for 25% off in the description box below for that course. Or you can use that same coupon code with you, all one word. You can also use it for the all access membership pass, which comes with all of our courses, 40 plus at this point, and the 4 live Zoom calls with myself and all the students every single week. So let's talk about this topic. So first and foremost, when we are looking at boundaries, if we have a lack of boundaries, we're going to feel a few key things. We're going to feel unseen. We're going to feel unheard. We're going to feel misunderstood. We're going to feel taken advantage of in our lives. And we're going to feel resentment. Why? Because the more we are lacking boundaries, the more we are going to struggle with these different challenges. And I have another video explaining all about like these key ingredients to sort of tell, okay, am I lacking boundaries? How to really notice. And how to sort of recognize these patterns that exist. But just as an example, if you are feeling unheard, part of this can be, okay, I'm not communicating my boundaries. I'm not showing up to express myself. And if I don't know my own needs and boundaries, I'm not going to be expressing them well to other people. And then what am I going to feel from my relationships to others? Well, they're violating my boundaries because they don't know what those boundaries are. And then I'm going to feel resentful, taken advantage of, frustrated, all these different things, not necessarily because I have bad people in my life. Of course, we can have unhealthy people in our lives, and you want to be aware of that and pay attention to red flags and all that stuff. But the vast majority of times that I see people struggling with resentment as it relates to feeling like their boundaries are violated, I would say 3/4 of the time at least, there is an experience happening where that one party feeling the resentment is also not communicating their boundaries. And this can be really, really challenging. So step one, we have to be able to communicate our boundaries. And these steps are not in any particular order. These are like principles to understand. And I can maybe make another video about like the actual steps to setting boundaries. But again, we have a course that goes into that in like a tremendous amount of detail. So step or principle number one is you have to be able to communicate so that you feel like your boundaries can be received, so that you can feel heard and understood and respected and not taken advantage of, but supported and appreciated by the people around you. Number two, we have to learn to actually communicate our boundaries to ourselves first and really start setting them ahead of time. And what's really important is when people are struggling with boundaries, what often takes place is that, and I'm sure most of you can relate to this, who struggle with boundaries, is like, let's say that you have a conversation and maybe it's with your boss or your friend or your family member or your romantic partner or your coworker, and you leave that conversation and like half an hour later or 2 hours later, you're like, oh, I actually said yes to that thing and I really didn't want to do it. Or, oh, I feel like they communicated what they needed, but I feel like they never listened to me. I didn't get my side in. Or, you know what? That comment they made at the end of that conversation was rude. And I didn't realize it at the time. But I realize it now. And now I feel frustrated and upset. And then you're in your head, like spinning your wheels all this time later. And the time has passed or the ship has sailed. It's like you can't communicate any longer about that thing. And then you feel frustrated. And then in your head, you get mad at that person and you imagine all these scenarios of you standing up for yourself and speaking up. And that, you know what that is? That's your subconscious mind trying to get its needs met. Because the subconscious mind, when it can't get its needs met in the present, gets its needs met in fantasies of the future. And so your subconscious goes into like coping mode, trying to imagine that you set the boundary, trying to imagine you spoke up. And really, it's a symptom of you having a boundary issue in the first place. And especially if that's a pervasive thing in your life, it's a huge symptom of being boundaryless often. So that is our important principle Number two is to be aware that we have to set boundaries ahead of time, because it's very difficult for those of us who are new to boundaries to be able to set boundaries in the moment. So we have to know what they are ahead of time so that we can communicate with them with ease when these challenges happen. Of course, there will be things that pop up in life where like you couldn't have prepared for that thing ahead of time. But for example, if you know that your friend or your coworker always borrows your stapler at work and never gives it back, and it's starting to upset you because you're always looking for your stapler and running around and you have to put all these files together, and it's highly inconvenient over and over again. You want to know, okay, that's a boundary and that's a material boundary violation. And I have to have a conversation about it. It does not have to be in a resentful or mean way. It's just something you want to feel like you're free to communicate. Hey, I really need you to put the stapler back on my desk. If you can't remember, then you're going to have to buy your own. And you can, there's so many different ways to communicate that are healthy and effective. So our next one is we have to have clarity. And clarity goes with our fourth point as well. They kind of go hand in hand, which is we have to have clarity in the 7 areas of our lives. So, like, we need to be able to do a huge boundary audit. We need to know, okay, let's look at all 7 areas of our life and let's go through career, financial, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, relationships. And relationships can really be broken into 3 categories: friends, family, and romantic. And let's look, like, where do we feel taken advantage of? Where do we feel frustrated or resentful? And is there a boundary lacking there? And what would bring us a feeling of relief? What do we need to feel relief? And how can we communicate that boundary? So just some questions to like get your mind thinking and reflecting about boundaries is really important. And we have to audit, we have to look. And that's what helps us to recognize where we feel imbalanced, where we feel like, there's a missing piece, or where we're feeling unheard or frustrated. And it's through recognizing that frustration that we get that point of reflection. That frustration is a feedback mechanism to let us know to go inwards, figure out what specifically is frustrating us. Is it a boundary related issue? What would bring us relief? How can we communicate it? And that brings us a boundary that we can bring into our relationships. And these are very productive things to be doing instead of destructive things to be doing to our relationships, like not speaking up, building resentment, feeling frustrated, continuing to people please, and then at some point either pushing somebody away completely, or getting really mad and angry and yelling and doing things that are counterproductive, because sometimes we expect people to mind read instead of us communicating about everything. So really, really important. Our next piece here is we really want to have, this is number 5, different boundary types. Okay, so we want to know, okay, what are my different boundary types, from my material boundaries, like my things, and we can have incoming boundary violations and outgoing. So we can have people who, for example, violate a material boundary, let's say in the career area of life, by just stealing something like your laptop, right? Or we can have a boundary violation through like non-action, essentially. And that could be something like somebody borrowing your laptop and then not giving it back. So the lack of action is a violation of a boundary, right? You said, oh yeah, you can borrow it for the weekend, but then they never brought it back. So we can have boundaries that are violated from action and non-action. Okay. Very important to note. And we want to look at the different types of boundaries. So our material boundaries, our physical boundaries, our sexual boundaries, our thought boundaries, which have a lot to do with like our opinions, our beliefs, or even how much time we spend like ruminating about other people. And then we also have our emotional boundaries, which are very, very important to note. And this is like how much we're taking on other people's emotions. This is where I see a lot of people struggling in life in general with the different types of boundaries. So again, there's a deep dive in PDS for like all of this boundary related stuff. I feel like I'm already giving so much information here, so sorry if it's overwhelming. But there's like a structure and a course and all kinds of different stuff with a workbook and like reprogramming your boundaries, all these different things. The next really big piece I want you to know is that it's normal to feel terrified of setting boundaries. And when we're terrified, what we actually have to be able to do is recognize the limiting beliefs that are blocking us from setting those boundaries. So you can like know your boundaries and be super clear and have effective strategies for communication and know what they are in the 7 areas of life and know what type of boundaries are being violated. But If you were in a position where you feel like if you have boundaries, you're going to be abandoned or you're going to be rejected by everybody or everybody's going to shame you or think you're bad for having boundaries, it doesn't matter how clear you are and how aware you are ahead of time, you are still going to fall into the trap of being like, I'm terrified of setting boundaries and I'd rather be boundaryless and resentful than be abandoned. And so you have to find what limiting beliefs you have that are preventing you from setting boundaries and then work to reprogram those things. And then our last piece that's really important is we have to do exposure work. We have to visualize, we have to practice exposing ourselves incrementally over time and basically reprogramming through actions and behaviors our capacity to be able to set boundaries and communicate them effectively and feel safe in doing it. And the goal at the end of the day is to get to the point where you setting a boundary does not feel any differently than you saying like, hey, can you pass me a glass of water? And I'm telling you, as somebody who used to struggle with boundaries so much, like really had no concept of boundaries, like totally went through the like frustration cycle and then get mad and feel taken advantage of and all these different things. Meanwhile, like literally 99.999% of all of that was because I just didn't know how to speak up and talk about these things. Now I talk about needs and boundaries like it literally feels like I'm saying, hey, pass me a glass of water. It took work to get there, it took practice, but it has improved the health of all of my relationships by like, I don't even know how much, like just like incredible amounts. I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel connected, I feel authentic. I can't even think of one person in my life I feel resentful towards. And I was not like that. Like I was like the grudge holder extreme. So please know, and I'm not sharing this to say, like, look at me, I'm so great, I don't have resentment. Like, I'm saying this to tell you if I can move from one end of that spectrum to the other, from being boundaryless to like having boundaries and feeling so safe to communicate them, anyone else can. So I say that from a place of encouragement, and hopefully you will take a moment to believe in yourself and your ability to do this and to commit to the practice because it's so powerful and so transformational for all of our relationships and in our work area of our life, in our financial area of our life, everything. I never talked about how we can have financial boundaries as well, by the way. That was another boundary type. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you get a lot of value out of this channel, and I will see you in the next video.